Hello, everybody. It's Peter and Sylvia. We are back with our cups of teas and coffees, and we couldn't do these conversations without being armed with one of those, um, because we talk about stuff and things related to mental health and well-being, either in general or in business in particular. And the one we've picked for this particular video is something about what's happening out there in business world, where mental health and well-being is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And some people talk about it, some people pretend to do something about it, and other people actually do some very, very good work and have some thriving businesses because people in the business thrive. And something that I picked up recently, and I know you have too, Sylvia, is job titles. Job titles have started to appear, sort of giving the impression that there is emotions behind them. So you would have chief executive officer, that says nothing really. You have chief operations officer, you know that's the boss of operations. But now we also have someone called chief empathy officer. And I just wonder, what does one of those do when they're at home?
It's an interesting concept because I came across this title only fairly recently at a conference where someone introduced themselves up on the stage as the Chief Empathy Officer. And my immediate reaction was, oh, that's interesting. That's really pioneering. That's really out there. And that's really good that organisation is recognising the benefit of empathy in a leader, empathy in terms of the emotion. And then I got to thinking how interesting that they've combined the function of that position with an emotion. And perhaps that's a strategic thing, or perhaps that's intentional, but it does emote. Oh, that's good. Then I started digging a little bit more to find out what a chief empathy officer does. And I think you've looked at this as well, Peter, because there's quite a few articles written by very leading Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Business Insider, that the chief empathy officer, that as well as the empathy for your employees, because taps into that theory that I have, Peter, you heard before, a happy crew is a productive crew, being empathic towards your employees. However, there's also the side, it's about the empathy and connection with your clients. So it's more a business matter than perhaps an employee matter, or is it a bit of both? And it's interesting how the title Chief Empathy Officer conveyed that in me, and does that then convey that to other employees in that organisation? But does it then also send a message, a good message, that they recognise the value of empathy, whether that's for business and or the employees? It's an interesting shift, I think.
I love the shift, I really do, but at this point, I'm probably being a little bit suspicious or sort of cautious, just jumping for joy, because I've seen so many tick box exercises, so much sort of window dressing to make it look as if we are a great company. We do these things and it's just a PR exercise. Now, I have not worked in, and I do not work for companies with those job titles. So it is something that's new to me. And if the whole ethos of the company is such that a chief empathy officer is absolutely how we do things and what we believe in, happy days. But if it's just trying to attract employees, for example, you know, if I wanted to have a job and I investigate companies, I think, right, okay, they've got someone called a chief empathy officer. That must be a great company to work for. I'm going to put my CV in there. As a client, as a customer, I honestly don't know what I would do if I were approached by the chief empathy officer. I don't know if it's a customer-facing role. I can just imagine my bank giving me a ring and say, hey, I'm your empathy officer. What? I don't know, but again, it's my ignorance coming through here. But if it's just another PR exercise, I think that empathy officer would be the first one to go when the going gets tough. because it would be seen as an unnecessary expense of some description. But if it is really how the company works, great. But what I would rather like to see than someone knowing about empathy is compassion. That's the next step up, isn't it?
Yes.
We have sympathy. I feel sorry for you. Empathy, I feel sorry with you. I understand. I'm your shoes. Compassion is I actually do something about it. I'm able to help. So maybe I don't mind if the CEO is a chief executive officer. If behind the scene, that person is the compassionate executive officer. Because it's the doing, it's the being it that counts rather than just having a nice title on your business card.
I totally agree, and that's always been my position, that empathy is great, but compassion for me is even better, because we can empathize with someone and just back up for a moment. If you are a chief empathy officer, if as an employee there's a lack of understanding or it's not put forward what that job title is, does that mean that people think that that's the person to go to if they're struggling, rather than the other processes that you have within the organisation? And then will that chief empathy officer get overburdened with all these people going to them? But then if they are about sending the messaging and the communications to clients, as an umbrella term, there might be some sort of misinformation and misunderstanding which can cause challenges in the workplace. But equally, the term of empathy, is it something that we have? Is it innate? Is it something we can learn? Is it something that we are? Because I know, I don't know about you, Peter, but I know I've met people that say they're one thing, but you sense that they're really not. Now, is that something going on for me? But quite often it's something going on for them, i.e., are they empathic? Are they living, breathing empathy? And for me, empathy, as I say, is fabulous. But for me, compassion is even better. I can empathise with you, Peter, about certain things. But there is also a tendency to get stuck in that empathy. But for me, compassion is about, I empathise with you, Peter, but what can we do to ease your struggling? What can I do? What can we do to ease your pain, or whatever it is that's happening with or to you? And that for me is the edge. It's about doing something, taking actions rather than empathising. And another point I'd like just very briefly to make is, a lot of people talk about empathy, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. Brilliant. And treating people how I would like to be treated. I have a little bit of a wrinkle around that one, because I also believe I should be treating someone how they would like to be treated. I'll give you an example. When things were tough for me, if someone said to me, Sylvia, I think the best thing for you would be to go home, for me, that would be the worst thing that could possibly happen. So I think we also have to understand what empathy is, but I do believe that compassion is better, much better.
And I would just like to add to that. There's been so many surveys done over the years that what employees want is compassion from the bosses, and what the bosses do not want to give is compassion, because they see that as a weakness. So compassion isn't about saying yes to everything. Showing vulnerability isn't about rolling around on the floor crying your eyes out. It's about admitting that things aren't always perfect and that we're doing something about it. So if you could train yourself to have the compassion as a way of being in the office, on the shop floor, wherever it is, then you don't need the title. You just are able to see people, talk to people, understand where they're coming from, help them if necessary, or explain logically why they can't get what they want all the time. Because compassion is not about saying yes to everything. It's about making things work from a human perspective. And I think this is where the wheels come off very often. We have different interpretations of what it means, and we've been trained in different ways. Managers have very often been trained just being hard-faced, because otherwise you lose power, you lose respect. But the opposite is actually the case. You get more respect if you show the empathy and the compassion. And I think that might be a good place to ask for other people's opinion.
Yes.
This is just you and I bashing this one about, but it would be interesting to hear what other people think.
It's an interesting thing, because people may argue, and I think perhaps I would too, that these are qualities of good leaders anyway, to have empathy and compassion and sometimes show your vulnerability, because after all, that's a sign of strength, not weakness. At the same time, though, one could also counter argue that having those words in the titles makes it overt rather than hidden, rather than implicit. It's it'd be interesting what other people think.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Hopefully we have provoked a bit of debate here, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this series. Take care now. Bye.
Here we go. Bye-bye.